The idea was simple. What if the events of the 13 days of the Cuban Missile Crisis could be squeezed down into 13 hours? What if students of our time could step into the shoes of the decision makers in 1962? Would they chart a similar course? Or would they set humanity on the path to war?
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba.
Now we are in a standoff.
And we have right now the capability and the advantage.
We just heard that we have 18 hours until missiles are ready in Cuba to launch.
We will not even know that they have been launched until we see them in the sky.
Yes.
President, you're in a pretty bad fix.
We need to get the missiles out.
We got a problem.
They have nuclear IRBMs ready to fire.
They're pointing missiles at us too.
As of this moment, all military forces should stand up to DEFCON 3.
Should be mentioned is potentially illegal.
Take everything away from them.
Losses will probably be high.
How long are we going to play these games?
Make our final choices. There will be no more negotiations on this.
Mr. President, in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good evening, my fellow citizens.
My name is Heath Hamrick, and historical immersion is kind of my thing. I've been running history-based simulations for years. Different eras, different events. But this era, this project, is something special. Students are arriving to sign in for an immersive historical simulation based on the 13 days of the Cuban Missile Crisis. If all goes according to plan, before the night is over, these students will be stepping back in time to 1962.
There is a limitation, in other words, upon the power of the United States to bring about solutions. I think our people get awfully impatient and maybe fatigued and tired and say, we've been carrying this burden for 17 years. Can we lay it down? Well, we can't lay it down, and I don't see how we're going to lay it down in this century.
This room for the next 13 hours will be the cabinet room in John F. Kennedy's White House. Students enter having studied the world situation in 1962, the height of the Cold War, when escalating tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union threatened a third world war. They prepared for months for this night. They think they're ready. As they take their seats, they've officially moved out of the present and into the tense morning hours of October 16th, 1962. That morning, a spy plane flying over Cuba discovered startling evidence that the Soviet Union was building ballistic missile sites less than 90 miles from Florida. Photographs that would make the world tremble and bring humanity to the brink of catastrophe. The question is, what will these students do about it? When I enter the room, role-playing as President Kennedy, the clock on 13 hours of crisis starts to roll.
Late night. It is indeed, Mr. President.
Fellow teacher Neely Carter is portraying National Security Advisor McGeorge Bundy.
All right, let's have it.
It is his job to brief the gathered officials about the presence of Soviet missiles in Cuba and the danger they represent. The directive for the next hour: prepare to brief the president on options to face this crisis. The room explodes into frenzied conversation. The project has truly begun.
I was hoping that it would be serious and that we would get into actual policy, and we were just thrust into it. So we all sat down at the table and we all kind of looked at each other like, what did we get ourselves into? But you walked in as President Kennedy, and the first person you called on was Politics and Secretary of State. And I had prepared the materials, but I didn't realize what would be required of me. And it was really fun to just fly off the seat of my pants, work on what was going on, and really have to understand the material really fast.
90% of the materials students receive during this project are actual CIA or Defense Department documents that have been declassified in the years since 1962. Those documents and memos are being collated and distributed by a crew of devoted educators working behind the scenes. Teachers are filming the night's events, distributing materials at the appropriate times, and playing various roles throughout the night, including as the White House operator as students call from the cabinet room to convey orders or ask for more detailed information. In the cabinet room, that information is fueling the intense discussions going on over what to do about the situation in Cuba.
It doesn't matter if philosophy, I just lost a human life regardless of whether they're right or wrong. If you're making a left-hand turn and someone slams into you, it doesn't matter if it's your fault, you're still dead.
My initial reactions was excitement, and then I saw our first assignment, I saw our team, and I saw what we were gonna have to do by the end of the first brief. And then my reaction was despair.
Shows a little bit of strength on our part because we don't want to appear weak in this thing.
Yes. You know, and I was really surprised by the level of engagement throughout the entire night. When I first saw this, I was really kind of skeptical. I was like, how in the world are you going to keep kids engaged for 12 hours in discussions? I think the thing that really stuck out to me most, and it's not one particular event, it's how quickly they organized themselves when the deadlines came to present, and how, for the most part, very articulately they expressed their thoughts and opinions.
After a half hour of tense conference, the time has come for the XCOM, the name given to this special advisory committee, to brief the president.
During that period, the 15 people, more or less, who were directly consulted, frequently changed their view because whatever action we took had so many disadvantages to it. And each action that we took raised the prospect that it might escalate with the Soviet Union into a nuclear war.
Okay. What we know so far is that there are anywhere from 16 to 20 of these SS-4 missiles positioned throughout Cuba, each of which are not quite ready to fire, but when they are ready to fire, they will be ready to fire within 30 minutes of full preparation. That means getting them on the pad and launching, 30-minute time, very quick. From what we know, they're basically anti-aircraft, anti-troop landings. Anything that requires us offensively attacking them is going to be very painful for us. Losses will probably be high.
So, what we came up with was a blockade plan. Suffocate them out because obviously the Soviet Union is still transporting stuff in. So, blockade, keep everything else out that the Soviet wants in and suffocate their economy. Take everything away from them.
The present-day military leaders of the XCOM recommend a blockade of Cuba, a far cry from the more aggressive stance of their 1962 counterparts. The State Department's expert on Russia gives his opinion on why Nikita Khrushchev, leader of the Soviet Union, has sanctioned the delivery of nuclear missiles to Cuba.
My estimate is that he wants Poland. Second option for me, I would imagine, is he wants some missiles out of Turkey. I mean, he wants both of them, I'm sure. I'm pretty sure that Poland is what he wants more. Imagine Rhode Island suddenly decided it was a communist state, and then the Soviet Union told us that if we invaded Rhode Island, then they would nuke us. That's what Poland is doing. They don't like it.
I'm not convinced a blockade doesn't get us into a further conflict. It's something I want to discuss. I want to know how Khrushchev reacts to a blockade.
No decisions have been made. There's plenty of work that needs to be done. The military is looking at options that include everything from a blockade to a commando raid on the missile sites.
We need to play hardball with Russia.
Listen.
3,000 feet will get caught on radar. Underneath, it might be visible from the sky. So if we went at night on a cloudy night with no lights, we could possibly get paratroopers in from the sky. Now,
so I'm Secretary of Defense, and I remember when I first got into the room, you're like, okay, Secretary of Defense, what do you think? I'm like, oh, who's that? Oh, it's me. And so I had no idea what I actually said. I'm sorry if I messed up. So that was the moment I'm like, oh, this is real and I'm actually doing something. And that was the first moment I'm like, okay, I really got to get into this. I got to think.
One thing that definitely didn't happen in 1962 is a plan being cooked up by the Attorney General and her political advisors to ease economic restrictions on Cuba in exchange for the removal of the missiles.
Back from his rank or anything from the White House.
What if?
The National Security Advisor makes the rounds, reminding the students to think ahead, to control events, and to show forethought.
We need to control the message and communicate a clear message to Khrushchev. The president has asked me to make sure you guys know that we have to have extreme control
This is what they're doing.
over what our
And they'll
response
go
can
one
be.
way with it.
I'm waiting to eliminate all the variables that we could possibly I don't know if these things are operational. Find these things out. That has to be.
I got told the president declined the order for the YouTuber to fly over.
So what are our other options? A meeting with the Soviet foreign minister at 9:15. I bet he doesn't tell us about the missiles. I'm probably not going to tell him I know.
Meanwhile, the State Department prepares to brief the president on a meeting he's about to have with the visiting Soviet foreign minister. Will the existence of the missiles be revealed? Is this going to be a demand for a kind of ransom, the missiles in Cuba, for some kind of concession in West Berlin?
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go meet with the Soviet foreign minister. When I get back, we'll talk. I'll tell you what was said.
And so for the first hour and a half, I was just thinking that this is happening. This is happening. And I couldn't even say anything or just form proper words or sentences because I was just in shock. Like eventually the stress, it went into let's work mode. Like first I was panicking and just staring at everything and trying to comprehend what was going on, but then eventually I was like, okay, we need to work this out. And then it got better. And then worse.
Mr. Bundy will be in charge. Thank you.
It's much easier to make the speeches than it is to finally make the judgments, because unfortunately your advisors are frequently divided. If you take the wrong course, and on occasion I have, the president bears the burden, responsibility quite rightly. The advisors may move on to new advice.
Behind the scenes, teachers are constantly prepping and feeding new information to our ex-com. Information that is driving the crisis to a fever pitch.
Cruise missiles, not all of them, but 4 immediate. Look,
Yeah, it's right here.
now in Western Cuba. All right,
It's
look
right
at that. That's very in detail to that.
I don't know which one's which.
His plan was like since there's a whole.
And then also, we're still waiting on information on Germany and what their intentions are.
But this proves that they don't doubt these missiles are Soviet. They came from the Soviet Union.
But that's not what he wants. What he wants is those missiles out of Cuba.
If you understand Che Guevara's brand of guerrilla warfare and how it functions in Cuba and how they overthrew the old Cuban regime, and you still believe that is a good idea, you need to give me what I need to tell the international community.
Anything, any new updates, they need it.
Regarding what?
We don't care who it is, but we need a liaison.
We could not organize or focus on anything in specific. We would hit a conspiracy theory for the tiniest misinformation we would find, piece of information we would find. And Sean would say something brilliant but unrelated. And we would be like, yes, we gotta expand on this.
Our guy in the KGB team. So if we're going to give Fidel Castro false information about our capabilities, then we need to make sure that he'll believe it. So depending on the rank and trustworthiness of our guy in the KGB, will depend on whether we can act on that plan.
The U.S. did have a spy in Soviet military intelligence, a spy codenamed Ironbark.
Yeah, Soviet bases in Cuba. Those
Wait, were there launch sites that were Soviets?
You told me a minute ago that there were Soviet ones.
No,
I didn't.
You told me.
Were they operational yet?
The missiles in Cuba are operational, and they can shoot within 18 hours.
Evidence of ICBMs at a base in Cuba. So,
By the time the president returns, the situation has grown far worse.
Well, our experts at state called it. I talked to the Soviet foreign minister, Gromyko. He did not mention anything about missiles in Cuba. As far as I can tell, they still don't know that we know about the missiles. They have 16 SA-2 SAMs along the coast of Cuba, mostly in the northwestern area. As we've gone over before, 4,000 to 6,000 block technicians to teach Cubans how to operate these SAM sites, and missiles will go on to that. That means that from the order given to launch 18 hours. They are operational. But I mean, we have no BMEW warning system, which means we would have no warning these missiles were going to hit us until they were right on top of us. Until
They're
we
too
see
close,
them.
in
They're
other
way
words.
too close.
Hold on. What you're saying is that these missiles, if launched, and they are ready to be launched,
18 hours.
Anywhere.
From the order, 18 hours from the order.
we will not even know that they have been launched until we
can
see them in the sky.
Yes.
Mr. President, you're in a pretty bad fix.
You're all in it with me.
In real life, it was Air Force General Curtis LeMay who tells the president, "You're in a pretty bad fix." Kennedy's response, both in 1962 and in this simulation, were the same.
Going with the blockade idea, I do agree that avoiding violence as much as possible is a very, very good idea.
Over here, Madam Attorney General.
Why are they going to be okay with us committing their sons to a blockade that, should be mentioned, is potentially illegal in the stance of international law? One of the longest standing laws in international law is the law of the sea, that states you only have jurisdiction over the 12 miles from your coastline. And as far as I know, we'll be breaking that law, and we could potentially be alienating a lot of people in the UN by doing that. So I think it's worth reaching out to the countries that are surrounding Cuba. If we're going to do the blockade, I think that we can't be the only ones to do it. I think we would have to bring in Central American allies who are closer to their coasts and can help justify that, because we will be in flat violation of the law.
And by the end of it, I was getting pretty unfiltered. And I have to admit, I'm personally quite a dove, which is ironic considering both my parents are ex-military. But I'm a big dove, and so I was disagreeing with a lot of the policy decisions that were being made because I'm a big world peace fan myself.
We need to get the missiles out. That must happen. No matter what else happens, the missiles must be gone.
Yes, sir.
A consensus, 11:15. I'll hear from all four groups, and then I will make a decision.
So it's very difficult to always make judgments here about what the effect will be of our decisions on other countries. In this case, it seemed to me that we did pick the right one.
Kennedy has asked for a consensus. Now, they just have to find one.
You say, we'll take them out of Hungary or whatever, we'll work it out, right? It's just a sketch. We take them out of Hungary, you take your missiles out of Cuba, nobody dies.
Marines, 12 to 14 days. Army, 14 to 20.
White House operator.
Hello, this is Deputy Ambassador to the UN, Niemeyer. We're requesting information on Cuba's exports. Who is their biggest trade partner? What are the percentages? And just any information on their imports and exports. Thank you.
Understood, thank you.
Right? So our plan is to sort of destroy their economy and then help them rebuild it. If they're already trying to boost their economy at the moment, that would not be a good thing to hinder them at all, because then that would just get them mad.
So there's another option on the table. We can make a press statement the same day that we talk to the UN General Assembly. In front of the UN General Assembly, we release all the information. We do an information splash. We say, look, the USSR has just invaded this tiny country that just had a communist revolution. They have put missiles on our back door, and at this point, we see that nuclear war is becoming more and more inevitable.
Fidel is totally unstable. It says that he'll always want to rebel.
I think honestly, the biggest achievement I had that entire night was getting the blockade. I mean, honestly, in the beginning there, it looked like it was not gonna go through. Everyone was thinking about these other different plans. Now I was like, this has to go through. I mean, honestly, I think all the problems with the blockade plan are just not that crazy bad. I mean, we have ways to communicate with them. It's giving away to telling Russia, hey, we know what's going on. Everyone else knows that, hey, Russia is giving missiles to a country that wants to attack a fellow ally. So all these other countries then are going to be forced to do something about it and getting everyone on their toes.
The briefing begins, and the president is given the options. Just as in 1962, there is no unanimous choice.
Mr. Director, my personal opinion is that we do the embargo and do not invade Cuba for under any circumstances.
By embargo, you mean blockade?
Blockade, yes. Unless nuclear missiles are launching in the air as we speak, we do not put troops in Cuba or around Cuba.
Thank you, sir.
Some of us think the blockade's a good idea, but personally, I don't think either of them are, considering the military invasion, how much time it takes to get each amount of troops and in and over there. The blockade helps stop coming in, but it doesn't help the missile crisis that's already there. So I vote for diplomatic and bigger that way.
We are not looking to do any exchanges. We do not want to go to war with the Soviets unless it is completely necessary. Get support of not only the American people, but the people of Europe, possibly the people of Cuba, and manipulate the situation so that we look strong even if there's no clear winner.
We believe that our best course of action is a diplomatic and economic solution. From a legal perspective, the blockade, even if it's successful militarily, we risk damaging our international reputation pretty irreparably for the next few decades. And at the end of the day, I'd like to think that we're going to get past a nuclear holocaust and that won't happen, and that we also need to keep in mind the reputation of our nation as a leader of the free world beyond this conflict.
This is going to be my decision, and we'll implement it. We're going to do a two-phase option here. I want the military, especially the Navy, to prepare for a blockade of Cuba. I want to also prepare a carrot to Castro involving the lifting of economic sanctions if he removes the missiles. In tandem, they might work together. Castro will feel the pinch economically. At the same time, we've got a blockade that looks strong. It might work in tandem.
The decision has been made. The United States will blockade Cuba to prevent any further missiles from reaching Cuban shores. Preparations are underway.
Said that they might use a submarine to bypass the quarantine.
There's got to be an invasion plan of Cuba that we've got on the shelf. I want to hear about it. In case the blockade doesn't work, I'm afraid.
It won't damage the ship at all. It will just
If it's going to lead to war, that needs to come from me. So
I feel like we should discuss that with intelligence on what they know about.
I mean, just kind of with all like this scrambling we were doing with trying to get like military to tell us what they were doing with getting paratroopers ready and how far along the blockade was, trying to get drafts written up to send out to the EU and NATO to talk about all the South American countries to see if we even could do a blockade, and then the press getting antsy because we hadn't even spoken to them for the better part of an hour. That part, like, I was literally running to like 4 or 5 different tables every 10 seconds, and that part kind of, and then all of it just crashed at once.
The State Department goes to work on drafting 2 statements, one to the Organization of American States, asking for their support, and one to the Soviet leader, explaining the reasons for the blockade.
Ended up writing speeches speed writing speeches.
The political group is drafting too, the all-important address Kennedy will make to the American people, announcing the situation in Cuba and the blockade. So far, the details have changed from 1962, but the end result is the same, a blockade of Cuba. The military is on high alert. The American people are about to find out just how close we are to a nuclear war. The Soviets know Americans know, and they know Kennedy has to do something about it. It's past midnight, people are getting tired, the stakes are only getting higher, and the worst is yet to come.
Yes, this is the President. Please pass on an order. As of this moment, all military forces should stand up to DEFCON 3. Thank you.
As a deputy press secretary, the part that really struck to me that I was like, wow, I can actually do something here. We were working on the speech for you, and we kind of had a rough draft, and you were like, no. You had us fix all this stuff, and I was like, oh crap, we have 3 minutes. So I threw it all together, and you made some revisions, but overall I think I did pretty well on that, and that's where I was like, I can actually do things here.
In 1962, President Kennedy revealed the Cuban situation to the nation in a televised address. In our cabinet room, the students gather to hear the president's speech.
Mr. Bundy, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
We're about to start this address. You can pass on my compliments to the Attorney General, the Press Secretary, Communications Director, that staff. It's very well done.
Fantastic.
October 22nd, 1962, President John F. Kennedy broadcast a special message to the nation from his office in the White House. Here is President Kennedy as he delivered that message, bearing on recent events in Cuba.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. Today, we should get straight to the point. We have hard evidence
that the Soviet Union has placed offensive nuclear missiles on the island of Cuba,
approximately 90 miles from our shores. Your government
will settle this situation with a quarantine. The quarantine will consist of an 800-mile perimeter
around that imprisoned island. Our Navy will be stopping all ships carrying offensive weapons or other military contraband
to Cuba from any nation. I have no doubt that this situation will be resolved.
The price of freedom is always high.
And Americans have always been willing to pay that price. One action we will never take
is surrender. Have faith that your government will ensure that we, the American people,
will always prosper.
Thank you.
And good night.
There was some disagreement with the course we finally adopted, but the course we finally adopted had the advantage of permitting other steps if this one was unsuccessful. In other words, we were starting, in a sense, at a minimum place. Then, if that were unsuccessful, we could have gradually stepped it up until we had gone into a much more massive action, which might have become necessary if the first step had been unsuccessful.
The president encourages a well-deserved round of applause for the team that drafted his speech to the nation.
Well, hopefully the American people think so too. Ladies and gentlemen, our situation as it stands. We have initiated our blockade of Cuba. We have prepared for that. Now we are in a standoff.
Now it's back to work. The national security team has time before Soviet ships reach the blockade line. But despite the president's address, the blockade doesn't have the wholehearted support of the group, and the situation is escalating.
Castro just tripled all of his forces, and basically he knows that something's up, and he thinks that we're bluffing.
Castro's army is super loyal to him, so they're going to carry out his mindset for a while.
The blockade's in effect.
I haven't got my Dominican Republic papers back.
However, if the Organization of American States votes to support us, it does recognize, the UN Charter does recognize a hemispheric right to defense. We could invoke that as a reason for our quarantine, that as a hemisphere we are protecting ourselves. Also, I will not be the first president that violates the Monroe Doctrine.
The students come up with the idea of dropping leaflets on the Cuban people to try and undermine their support of Castro. Believe it or not, this was something that was actually tried in 1962.
As soon as we attack, if we initiate war, we are immediately in the wrong. No matter what.
What if they shoot us?
As Soviet ships steamed towards the blockade line, the ex-com continue to work full steam on the details of the quarantine. The State Department dives into the complicated task of preparing a briefing for American Ambassador to the United Nations, Adlai Stevenson. It will be Stevenson who has to convince the world that America is right. The students need to present a solid case if America's actions are going to be seen as justified.
There's also this thing called customary law. It's something that can be established after decades of operating in this specific way. We're having a copy of the Monroe Doctrine printed off right now. We can argue that it's customary law. We can assume that our allies in the hemisphere are going to agree with us. That's going to give us the best legal standing.
Ambassador Stevenson, this is the president. I have here my diplomatic group, including the Secretary of State and the Attorney General. They're going to brief you on what we'd like you to say to the UN. Mr. Stevenson, who's our first brief?
Hello, Ambassador Stevenson. This is the Secretary of State. We're here to brief you on your UN hearing. We're going to divide your UN statement into 4 pieces. The first one is to describe, and I just loved being at the wall and brainstorming with our team, talking about like real policy. And then when we were done, I was in my power heels, right? And we would march as a team across the carpet to the phone, and we would put it on speaker. And then in the end, when I had to talk for the treaty, because I kind of like a dream of like doing this. It's like I've seen a lot of pictures of like the presidents like leaning against their desk with their phone. And so I was like leaning against the desk with the phone on the phone with the ambassador, and I was like, my dreams are coming true. So yeah, I just felt like it was so satisfying to come together as a team and create something and walk across the seal in your power heels.
Okay, thank you for calling. I will take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Then, in the middle of the crisis, a series of unexpected and frightening events unfold.
We had a problem. An F-106 crashed.
Wait, this plane is carrying a nuclear warhead? And we don't know if it's going to explode. Get on that, find out.
The U.S. Armed Forces have gone to DEFCON 2, the stage of military readiness right before all-out war. As part of that order, American fighter interceptors are loaded with nuclear-tipped missiles and scattered to different airfields. Tragically, one of those interceptors crashes and burns on takeoff.
Plane is ablaze. We don't know the condition of the pilot or the condition of the nuclear warhead in that plane. The Joint Chiefs are working on it. Keep that in your mind. If an explosion goes off in Indiana, how are the Soviets going to respond?
And just as the blockade is announced to the world, the American agent in the Soviet intelligence, Ironbark, is arrested by the KGB and executed.
Well, that's more bad news.
This isn't a crisis of words alone. There are very real, very personal dangers involved.
Alive and uninjured.
I assume
the nuclear warhead has not been compromised and has been secured by the SIC forces.
2 a.m. has come and gone. Tensions are rising as Soviet ships near the blockade line.
I think he's doing the same thing you are doing. I think he's thinking the exact same way of, he knows about this international law. He's brought it up. He's thinking, if I can get them to shoot on me, I can win this. So it might be
playing chicken.
Unless you get him to force his hand at.
One of us has to blink first.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anything else new?
Yes, we do actually. We've identified several ships coming towards the blockade. What's important about these images is that it shows that they are carrying contraband, in fact, and there's no way of hiding it. This ship you see here, we do not have a name for it, but it is carrying military personnel on the front and military vehicles.
Admiral?
Going with your analogy of who blinks first, I honestly think Russia has duct taped their eyes open. Every move they've made, we've been reacting to. They've done something and we've been reacting to. So I mean, I think honestly, we've been at war this whole time, it's just no one's actually shot a bullet yet. And I think the time the first bullet shoots is in 2 days when those ships meet each other. I think we need to start thinking ahead to possible strategies to come in on top.
The question is, how does anyone come out on top of a nuclear war? The answer is postponed by good news from the Organization of American States, who have voted to support the U.S. blockade.
The United States has asked that member nations of the Organization of American States vote on a resolution to approve a quarantine of that nation. Submitted to a vote, the resolution was approved by the 18 favorable votes, and the call was approved unanimously. Okay, you can all clap now, because that's a win.
The eyeball-to-eyeball moment has come. Soviet ships will reach the blockade line at any moment.
Hold that. Ladies and gentlemen, keep it down. I'm going to put it on speaker.
Right now.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I'm at the flag plot of the Pentagon. I have a note just handed to me. We've just received information that all 6 Soviet ships currently identified in Cuban waters, and I don't know what that means, have either stopped or reversed course.
Let me say again, Mac. The Soviet ships approaching the line have stopped or turned around.
Sir, clarification is coming in right now. Soviet ships suspected of carrying offensive materials seem to have reversed course at some point during the last few hours. We were eyeball to eyeball, and I think the other guy just blinked. Congratulations, sir.
Alright. This doesn't end things, it just pushes it off.
This certainly isn't the end, but at the very least, a test has been passed. The students in the room, however, know that the situation remains acutely dangerous. The Soviet missiles are still in Cuba, still aimed at the United States, and nearing completion.
The other point is something that President Eisenhower said to me on January 19th. He said, no easy matters will ever come to you as president. If they're easy, they will be settled at a lower level. So the matters that finally come to you as president are always the difficult matters, or matters which carry with them large implications. So this contributes to some of the burdens of the office of the presidency, which other presidents have commented on.
Within the next hour, we're going to have to make our final choices. It seems to me that we have won every step along the path that we have taken, except the final victory, which is getting the missiles out of Cuba. Every step of the way, you have won.
But is a symbolic victory enough? Everyone is aware that it will only take a single mistake to send the world spiraling into war. And no one wants to make that mistake.
Intercepted radio traffic suggests that Soviet forces in Cuba used the cover of darkness last night to conduct a dress rehearsal for the firing of their nuclear missiles. Missiles were erected, targeting cards were inserted, and missiles were prepared to fuel them.
Right now, personally, the only options I see us having are either to hold on to this embargo until some deal can be made, or to really just immediately make a trade with the Soviet Union as to how we can get these missiles out of Cuba as quickly as possible. Just basically with the classic spy trade, you give us this guy back and we'll give you this guy back. Look, we'll get our missiles out of here if you take your missiles out of here. Compromise where you can, stand fast where you have to, and in this situation, we have to compromise.
Compromise isn't as easy as it might seem. At this point, everything is interpreted in the light of the crisis. Everything carries a heavier weight. Everything has the potential to be misunderstood or misinterpreted. And everyone asks themselves, how can I be sure when the stakes are so high? Then, a bombshell. An American reporter has been approached by a KGB spy with an offer for the U.S. government.
Wait, what is this coming from? Why is there an ABC News reporter?
The Soviets will remove the missiles in exchange for the removal of the blockade and a U.S. guarantee of Cuban sovereignty.
Accepting a deal where they remove all offensive missiles in return for us taking out the quarantine. The president wants us to find out if it's a ploy, because they make no mention of Turkey or Berlin in this. And
wait, so
out of Cuba.
They're just gonna quit?
As far as we take out the quarantine, talk to intelligence. We don't know if it's real or not.
Khrushchev sent a letter to you about this, and he didn't state outright, but he did open up an option saying that the Soviet Union would be interested in mutual discontinuing of armaments.
The mood in the room is lightened over the potential deal, but the mood does not last long. As the final day of the crisis starts, things take a grim turn. Soviet personnel have replaced Cuban ones in charge of the missile batteries, air defense sites, and military command.
So basically they've taken over the military.
The Cuban military?
Yeah, they're running everything now.
The Secretary of State has also received a communique from Khrushchev that offers a deal significantly different than the one communicated earlier.
He will withdraw offensive weapons from Cuba if the United States withdraws our rockets from Turkey.
Wait, that's not the deal we offered.
No, but it's the deal he countered.
Don't take it. I mean,
Why not?
Because he's now on his heels. He's like falling backwards. We've got the whole world on our side. We've got the advantage, and he now can't come in here and strong arm us with nothing.
You can counter again and say yes to this too. You can ask for something else next time.
Nothing.
No.
Exactly. Then why should we take his offer? Why?
The misunderstandings about the Soviet willingness to deal is having repercussions on the students. Some still advocate for a direct trade, missiles for missiles. Many, however, are pressing for a more forceful approach.
He realizes, oh, I can't do this anymore. They're winning. And they're like, oh, well, let's do this little peace deal. And then once we accept it, he makes it bigger. Are we really going to let him get away with this?
I am going to stick by what I've been saying for the last hour. The Jupiter missiles in Turkey are obsolete. I can accept that deal if that deal never becomes public. He cannot get that victory. Figure out how to make that work. Ma'am.
And so when I finally got to address the public relations thing and bring up, are we cat and mice or are we men? That was kind of like the moment for me where I just totally gave in to all of my criticism to kind of let it fly and just kind of forgot, like, this is a simulation.
Could it be possible for us to go completely the different direction and use this as a jumping off point to start talks? Because otherwise this entire situation has just been a drop in the bucket in an ocean of Cold War antics that have been going on for how long now? How long is this realistically sustainable? How long are we going to play these games and remain cat and mice before we realize that until we're men and start talking to each other like human beings, this situation isn't going to de-escalate. We have a chance here to go public, talk to the UN, bring other nations in, and try to bring peace.
Despite the Attorney General's plea, it is not at all clear that peace will win the day. Events escalate, and the chance of a mistake or a misunderstanding leading to nuclear war increases with every moment. Peace hangs by a thread. Any wrong move can cut it.
And I have another one too. Soviet nuclear test up in Antarctica right now.
The Soviets have now taken over Cuba for whole Greece.
No, they powered up their weapons. That's what this is.
No, but they switched everything percentage to Russian.
We still know where they are. They're basically saying we don't trust the Americans just like we don't trust our own.
Attorney General.
Oh yeah, they're going to follow this.
U-2 flight piloted by Major Rudolph Anderson has failed to check in. The flight plan called for Anderson to fly within a range of 8 SAM sites at an altitude of 72,000 feet. Analysis is that his airplane was shot down by Soviet manned SAM site in Cuba.
Never accept that. They shoot down one of our pilots and give up something. Right thing here, not to overreact.
Defuse this situation if we can.
The AG's deal is finalized. Removal of missiles from Cuba and Turkey, a nuclear test ban treaty, and a peace summit. Cleverly, these students have very publicly pushed the ball of world peace into the Soviet court.
So, one of the terms of this deal that we have is that the Soviet Union would agree to go to a peace talk conference about negotiating a nuclear test ban sponsored by the...
In order to get the Soviets to accept the deal, an ultimatum was delivered, just as it was in 1962. Accept peace, because if you don't, war is the sole item on tomorrow's agenda. It is the climax of the event, then and now.
I'm just going to say, you, throughout this whole little fiasco, have always insisted that you're doing all this in the name of peace, well, peace in Cuba specifically, and world peace on a greater scale. I'm just calling to let you know that this is, if you really want world peace, this is your chance. There will be no more negotiations on this. If you want peace, you will accept this offer.
Well done.
There's a final moment of tension. One last twitch. One last threat. It seems too contrived and dramatic to be real. In 1962, it actually happened.
How how are they getting all these ships?
One moment.
Sir?
Mr. President, just got this in. The North American Air Defense Command in Colorado Springs has issued this saying that the air defense radar has picked up evidence of an unexplained missile launch from the Gulf of Mexico. The trajectory suggests that the target is somewhere in the Tampa Bay area of Florida.
Are you kidding me?
Reactions? Wait, just one?
Not the one.
Not even the Russians have it that in for Tampa Bay. Thoughts?
Why would he send forces to destroy that? I mean, couldn't they send a nuclear missile or
False alarm. Notice of missile launch in Gulf of Mexico's target on Tampa, Florida is a false alarm.
After 13 hours, the wait is over. A communique comes in from Khrushchev, either accepting the deal and ending the crisis, or turning it down and pushing the world into war. Before everyone left the project, they signed a poster with a simple statement.
We did it! We did it!
It had been an amazing night for all the educators involved, watching students embrace the challenges thrown their way. They argued, they disagreed, they analyzed, they schemed, and even when they were getting tired in October of 1962. And that was the whole point.
What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana, enforced on the world by American weapons of war. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time.